Many people believe that all nuts are healthy, but that's not true. Some of them undergo processes that destroy their nutrients, accumulate toxins, or even contribute to inflammation in the body. In today's video, you'll learn about the 4 worst nuts you should never include in your diet. And more importantly, you'll discover the 4 best options to replace these nuts in a smart and healthy way. If you want to improve your diet, avoid common pitfalls, and understand once and for all which nuts are really worth eating, stick with me until the end. This information can make all the difference to your health. When we talk about nuts, the first thing that comes to mind is health. After all, they are natural foods rich in good fats, protein, and minerals, but that's only part of the story. Not all nuts are created equal. Some, because of how they are grown, processed, or consumed, can become real villains in disguise in your daily life. So in this first topic, we're going to dive deep into the 4 worst nuts you should avoid at all costs. And it's not just about taste or nutritional preferences. We're talking about real impacts on your metabolism, cell function, cardiovascular system, and even the risk of inflammatory diseases. First on the list is the peanut, which, although technically a legume and not a nut, is consumed as such almost everywhere in the world. It is one of the most popular snacks found in bars, parties, and even fitness diets. But what few people know is that peanuts are highly associated with contamination by aflatoxins, toxins produced by fungi of the genus Aspergillus, which grow easily in warm, humid environments. These substances are hepatotoxic and potentially carcinogenic, especially at high levels of consumption over time. In addition, peanuts have a worrying inflammatory profile. Rich in omega-6 fatty acids, when consumed in excess and out of balance with omega-3, they can contribute to a chronic inflammatory state in the body, which is at the root of several modern diseases, such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, and autoimmune diseases. The second nut that deserves caution is the Brazil nut. Although famous for its high selenium content, which makes it attractive to many seeking antioxidant benefits, excessive consumption of this nut can be dangerous. This is because selenium, when consumed beyond the tolerable limit, can become toxic and cause effects such as hair loss, fatigue, nausea, neurological problems, and hormonal changes. And since the concentration of selenium varies from nut to nut, it is very difficult to control intake accurately. Many people, when consuming a handful a day thinking they are doing something good for their health, may unknowingly exceed the safe daily limit. For those who consume Brazil nuts regularly, especially in large quantities, the risk of selenium toxicity is real and often overlooked. Another nut that is in the crosshairs of experts is salted roasted macadamia nuts. Although raw macadamia nuts have nutritional value and are rich in healthy monounsaturated fats, the problem arises when they are roasted at high temperatures and refined salt is added. Excessive heat can oxidize the good fats, making them pro-inflammatory and promoting free radicals in the body. In addition, many industrialized versions are soaked in cheap vegetable oils such as soybean or corn oil, which are highly inflammatory. Excess sodium is also a concern, contributing to high blood pressure and fluid retention. What was supposed to be a functional food can quickly turn into a disguised, ultra-processed product, dangerous for those who consume it frequently. Finally, we have caramelized or sugared pecans, which are quite common in desserts, industrialized granola, and ready-made snack mixes. This is one of the most common pitfalls for those seeking a healthy diet, but are swayed by the idea that it's just a nut with a little sugar. The truth is that these sweetened versions are rich in high fructose corn syrup, preservatives, and often artificial colors. The impact of this on the body goes far beyond empty calories. There is increased oxidative stress, blood sugar spikes, and liver overload. The liver, which already works hard to metabolize sugars, suffers even more from the accumulation of industrial fructose, which can lead to visceral fat accumulation and contribute to insulin resistance. The problem here is not the nut itself, but what the industry does to it. The crunchy appearance and sweet taste hide a food that is completely unrecognizable from its natural and beneficial form. The most worrying thing is that these nuts are widely available and are often promoted as healthy options in markets and attractive packaging. Consumers, without the time or technical knowledge, end up being misled into choosing dangerous versions, believing they are doing the best for their bodies. It is not about creating panic or completely eliminating certain foods, but rather understanding what is really behind each choice we put on our plates. Information is a powerful tool for transforming health, and when it comes to nuts, foods that are so small but so potent, every detail matters. When we look at a small, harmless, and natural-looking nut, it is difficult to imagine that it could cause any harm. After all, we have been told from an early age that foods that come from nature are, as a rule, healthy. And indeed, many nuts have nutritional profiles that are admired by experts. They are sources of good fats, vegetable proteins, fiber, minerals such as magnesium and selenium, and antioxidants. So why can certain nuts, or versions of them, be harmful to health? This is an essential question that requires more than simple answers. To understand why some nuts should be avoided, we need to delve into issues related to cultivation, industrial processing, chemical composition, and nutritional imbalances that often go unnoticed. digest. One of the first factors that makes a nut harmful is the way it is grown and stored. Many of these oilseeds are highly sensitive to the environment in which they grow and especially to where and how they are stored after harvest. Peanuts, for example, when stored in damp, poorly ventilated places, can develop microscopic fungi invisible to the naked eye. These fungi produce a highly toxic substance called aflatoxin, recognized as one of the most potent natural toxins known to man. Even in small amounts, chronic exposure to aflatoxin has been linked to liver damage, immune disorders, and an increased risk of liver cancer. And the problem is not limited to peanuts. Other nuts, such as chestnuts and pistachios, can also be affected, although less frequently. The end consumer, however, rarely has access to this information on packaging and ends up eating contaminated food without knowing it. Another critical factor is the oxidation of fats, a silent chemical process that is extremely harmful to the human body. Nuts are rich in unsaturated fatty acids, a characteristic that in principle is highly positive, as these fats help reduce LDL cholesterol and protect the cardiovascular system. The problem occurs when these fats come into contact with oxygen, excessive heat, or direct light, resulting in the formation of free radicals and pro-inflammatory compounds. This often happens during the industrial roasting process, where nuts are exposed to high temperatures to improve flavor, texture, and shelf life. However, this intense heat destroys some of the nut's natural antioxidants, oxidizes lipids, and profoundly alters their original composition. The result is a product with a pleasant taste, but with an inflammatory potential that, when consumed regularly, can contribute to degenerative diseases, premature aging, and even neurological disorders. In addition, the addition of artificial ingredients transforms what could be a healthy food into a disguised ultra-processed product. Many nuts sold ready to eat are loaded with refined salt, sugar, flavorings, colorings, and low-quality vegetable oils. Take caramelized pecans, for example. They may contain high-fructose corn syrup, a type of sugar strongly associated with insulin resistance, liver fat, and systemic inflammation. When we eat these seasoned versions of nuts, the body is not only absorbing natural nutrients, but also a host of compounds that sabotage metabolism. The same applies to overly salty versions, which raise blood pressure, retain fluids, and negatively affect kidney and cardiovascular health. What should be a functional food becomes a vector of metabolic imbalance. Another essential aspect that explains why some nuts are bad for you is the imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3, two types of essential fatty acids. Although both are important for the proper functioning of the body, excessive consumption of omega-6 without the proper counterbalance of omega-3 creates an environment conducive to chronic inflammation. In the past, our ancestors consumed omega-6 and omega-3 in proportions close to 1.1. Today, due to the modern diet and high consumption of processed foods, including processed nuts, this ratio reaches 20.1 in some populations. Nuts such as peanuts and pecans have high concentrations of omega-6, and if consumed in excess without the proper balance of omega-3 sources such as chia, flaxseed, or common nuts, they can trigger silent inflammatory triggers that manifest over time as joint pain, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders, and even mood swings. The issue of food allergies cannot be ignored when discussing potentially harmful nuts. Peanuts, for example, are one of the leading causes of severe allergic reactions worldwide. Even minimal amounts can trigger anaphylaxis in sensitive individuals, a potentially fatal reaction, and although this affects a smaller portion of the population, cases are on the rise, especially in children. Inadvertent consumption of foods that contain traces of nuts or are processed in factories that handle these ingredients requires extra attention, especially for those who live with severe allergies or care for someone with this condition. Finally, it is important to consider the false sense of security that many of these nuts create. The food marketing industry knows how to exploit the idea of healthy and natural as synonyms. Words like fitness, light, zero sugar, or high fiber appear on packaging as persuasive strategies, but they do not reveal the true metabolic impact of a food. When a nut is sold in a crunchy, sweetened, chocolate-covered, or sea salt roasted version, it carries with it an image of indulgence disguised as health. This creates a cycle of frequent and carefree consumption, especially by people who believe they are making conscious choices. But the reality is that many of these products are far from resembling food in its natural form, and worse, they are silently contributing to significant metabolic imbalances. When we understand all these factors, from how nuts are grown and stored to the industrial processes they undergo and the biochemical imbalances they cause, it becomes clear that the problem isn't necessarily the food itself, but rather how it is handled, processed, and consumed. The good news is that with knowledge and attention to detail, it is possible to avoid these pitfalls and make choices that are much more aligned with vibrant, sustainable health. However, to do so, it is essential to know which alternatives are really worth it, because while some nuts are true threats in disguise, others are underrated nutritional powerhouses, and it is these that we will discuss next. While some nuts should be avoided for their hidden side effects, others stand out as true medicinal foods, small nutritional powerhouses powerhouses that, when consumed correctly, can transform your health from the inside out. The best nuts not only offer good fats, but also carry a complex and highly beneficial combination of minerals, antioxidants, fiber, and anti-inflammatory compounds. These nuts are capable of protecting the heart, improving brain function, balancing hormone levels, and even supporting cellular metabolism. However, to reap these benefits to the fullest, it is essential to know which nuts these are and why they stand out so much among the many options available on store shelves. First on our list is the common walnut, also known as the English walnut or Mariposa walnut. Rich in omega-3 fatty acids of the ALA, alpha-linolenic acid type, this nut is one of the few plant sources capable of providing this type of anti-inflammatory fat in significant amounts. Omega-3 is essential for cardiovascular health, helping to reduce triglycerides, regulate blood pressure, and decrease the formation of fatty plaques in the arteries. In addition, the ALA present in walnuts acts on cognitive function, being an important ally in the prevention of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Walnuts are also rich in antioxidant compounds such as polyphenols, which fight free radicals and reduce oxidative stress, one of the main factors in premature aging. Their shape, which resembles the structure of a human brain, is almost symbolic. This is, in fact, one of the most beneficial nuts for mental and brain health. Next, we have raw almonds, one of the most studied and valued nuts in the world of functional nutrition. Almonds are excellent sources of vitamin E, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cells from damage, especially in tissues such as the skin and eyes. This vitamin also acts as a cardiovascular protector by preventing the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, one of the first steps in the formation of atherosclerotic plaques. In addition, almonds contain a balanced combination of fiber, vegetable protein, and monounsaturated fats, making them a low glycemic index food. In other words, they help control blood sugar levels, promote satiety, and can be great allies in diets for weight loss or type 2 diabetes control. Another distinguishing feature is magnesium, a mineral found in good quantities in almonds, which is essential for more than 300 biochemical reactions in the human body, including muscle relaxation, nerve function, and energy production. The third star among healthy nuts is the hazelnut, an often overlooked option that offers a surprisingly complete nutritional profile. Hazelnuts are rich in monounsaturated fats, similar to those found in olive oil, known for their protective effects on the cardiovascular system. They also provide good doses of manganese, copper, and vitamin B6, nutrients essential for brain health, hormonal balance, and the formation of neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine. Another highlight of hazelnuts is the presence of phytonutrients such as quercetin and ferulic acid, which have anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties. When consumed naturally, without added sugar or salt, hazelnuts are great for snacks between meals, as they provide slow-release energy and reduce cravings for ultra-processed foods. They are also very versatile in sweet or savory recipes, adding flavor and crunch without compromising health. Finally, we couldn't leave out the natural cashew nut, a true treasure of Brazilian biodiversity that goes far beyond its flavor. This nut is one of the best dietary sources of tryptophan, an essential amino acid that acts as a precursor to serotonin, the neurotransmitter responsible for well-being. This means that regular, balanced consumption of cashews can help improve mood, combat mild symptoms of depression, and even aid sleep quality. In addition, this nut provides significant levels of zinc and copper, minerals that are essential for immune function and collagen formation. Another important point is that cashews have less total fat than other nuts, making them a good option for those looking to control their calorie intake without sacrificing satiety. But be careful. To enjoy all these benefits, it is essential to eat them raw or lightly toasted, without added salt, oils, or sugars, which unfortunately is common in many processed versions. What these four nuts have in common is not only their individual nutritional value, but the synergy between their components. In other words, they not only nourish, but also modulate essential biochemical processes, strengthen the immune system, help maintain hormonal balance, and promote controlled inflammation in the body. This is especially important in a world where silent inflammation caused by ultra-processed foods, stress, a sedentary lifestyle, and pollution is at the root of most modern chronic diseases. Incorporating these nuts into your diet is a simple but deeply strategic move. They function almost as a form of smart nutrition, where each handful not only satisfies, but also positively informs the body on how to function better. Still, as with any food choice, how these nuts are incorporated into your daily routine makes all the difference. Appropriate portions, proper preparation methods, combination with other foods, and respect for each person's biochemical individuality are factors that can enhance or sabotage the expected results. Some people may benefit more from certain nuts than others, depending on their metabolism, current health status, level of physical activity, or even hormonal response. That's why in the next topic topic, we'll compare good and bad nuts side by side so you can see more clearly the nutritional differences, the impacts on the body, and understand how to make truly conscious choices based on concrete data and not just marketing promises. Making conscious food choices is not always a simple task. In a world where the food industry turns almost everything into a product and where colorful packaging promises health and energy in every bite, it's easy to get lost. When it comes to nuts, foods that at first glance seem harmless and even functional, the challenge is even greater. After all, how can we differentiate the truly nutritious versions from those that only mimic a healthy appearance? To understand this in depth, it is essential to look side by side at the biochemical impacts, nutritional values, processing methods, and systemic effects of so-called good nuts and bad nuts. This comparison reveals nuances that make all the difference between a food that promotes health and one that silently undermines it. Let's start with the difference in fat composition. Good nuts, such as common walnuts, raw almonds, natural hazelnuts, and cashews without additives, have a beneficial balance of mono and polyunsaturated fats. These fats not only lower LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, but also increase HDL, help maintain cell membrane integrity, and have anti-inflammatory effects. In contrast, bad nuts, such as salted roasted peanuts, caramelized or chocolate-covered nuts, and processed macadamia nuts, tend to be associated with oxidized fats or added refined vegetable oils, such as soybean, corn, or canola oil. These oils are high in excess omega-6 and when heated or stored improperly become sources of free radicals, promoting oxidative stress and persistent cellular inflammation. Another critical point is actual nutritional density. Healthy nuts offer much more than calories. They are rich in minerals such as magnesium, selenium, zinc, and iron, essential for enzyme function, hormonal balance, immunity, and energy production. In addition, they provide natural antioxidants such as vitamin E in almonds, polyphenols in walnuts, and phytonutrients in hazelnuts. Poor quality nuts, on the other hand, lose much of these micronutrients when they undergo aggressive roasting, the addition of sugar and salt, or chemical treatment. In many cases, the food that reaches the shelf no longer contains the bioactive compounds that characterized its natural version. This transforms a functional food into a high-calorie, low-quality product, an empty calorie that deceives the body and overloads the metabolic systems without delivering real nutrition. Blood sugar and hormonal responses to the consumption of these different nuts also vary radically. Good nuts, when eaten raw, help modulate insulin release, slow gastric emptying, and prevent blood sugar spikes. This is particularly important for people with insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, or type 2 diabetes. In addition, the fiber in these nuts promotes a healthy gut microbiota, which has a direct impact on metabolism and the regulation of hormones such as ghrelin and leptin, which are responsible for satiety and appetite. Ultra-processed nuts covered in sugar, salt, or preservatives have the opposite effect. They promote glucose spikes, favor visceral fat storage, increase inflammation in the intestinal tract, and generate a vicious cycle of compulsive eating, especially in people already vulnerable to hormonal imbalances. In addition, it is essential to analyze the systemic inflammatory impact of these different categories. Foods that stimulate chronic inflammation, such as processed nuts loaded with refined oils, create an environment conducive to the emergence of silent and progressive diseases, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue, cognitive dysfunction, and even mood imbalances. In contrast, natural nuts are immune system modulators, helping to control excessive inflammatory responses. The antioxidant compounds found in good nuts neutralize free radicals, protect cellular DNA, and slow premature aging. This protective effect is not just a theoretical promise, but has been consistently observed in clinical studies with populations that regularly consume small amounts of unprocessed nuts, such as in the Mediterranean diet, for example. Another key difference is the sensory and psychological effect that these nuts have on consumers. When eaten mindfully, good nuts help develop a more refined and sensitive palate that is less dependent on extreme stimuli. They teach the body to appreciate the natural flavor of food and respond better to internal signals of hunger and satiety. Ultra-processed nuts, on the other hand, stimulate dopamine receptors intensely and artificially, creating an addictive eating pattern. This is especially dangerous in a context where food is no longer just nutrition, but has become an emotional outlet. The way food is presented, its texture, its overly sweet or salty taste, all of these influence neural patterns and reinforce compulsive and automatic behaviors that undermine long-term health. Finally, there is the environmental and ethical factor, which cannot be ignored when thinking about conscious choices. Natural nuts, especially when purchased from small producers or agroecological systems, have a much smaller ecological footprint. They are less packaged, less handled, less transported, and less stored. In contrast, ultra-processed nuts go through a long industrialization chain, consume more energy, generate more plastic waste, and are linked to less transparent production chains. contains. By choosing natural and minimally processed nuts, consumers are not only doing themselves good, but also contributing to a more ethical, sustainable, and conscious food production model. This comparison, when made clearly and thoroughly, reveals an often overlooked truth. The quality of food matters as much as its origin. The same nut can be a superfood or an inflammatory product depending on how it is grown, processed, stored, and, of course, consumed. The power lies in the details and in our ability to make more informed, less impulsive choices that are more connected to what truly nourishes us. And now that we can see more clearly what distinguishes a good nut from a bad one, the next step is to understand how to bring these choices into our daily lives. Because, in practice, knowing what is best is not enough. We need to know how to apply this knowledge in our daily lives in a simple, balanced, and sustainable way. Knowing which nuts are good for your health is the first step. Understanding why they work is the second. But it's when it comes to including these foods in their daily lives that many people stumble. The reality is that knowledge alone does not change habits. It needs to be put into practice. And to do that, it's essential to understand how to incorporate healthy nuts into your routine in a smart, balanced, and enjoyable way. It's not about filling jars with nuts and eating handfuls at random, but about building a conscious relationship with these foods. After all, even the best ingredients can lose their value if they are consumed incorrectly, without context, or in excess. The first key point to include healthy nuts in your daily diet is to understand the ideal serving size. Because they are high in calories and densely nutritious, nuts should be consumed in small amounts, paying attention to satiety and balance in the rest of the diet. A recommended daily serving is around 20 to 30 grams, the equivalent of a small handful, or about 5 to 8 nuts, depending on the type. This amount provides enough good fats, fiber, protein, and micronutrients to generate benefits without overloading the digestive system or causing calorie accumulation. Eating nuts straight from the package while working or watching television, for example, is a habit that negates the nutritional quality of the food, turning it into yet another source of automatic and unconscious eating. A strategic way to incorporate nuts into your diet is to use them as part of larger meals rather than just as isolated snacks. For example, adding chopped nuts to breakfast, mixed into plain yogurt with fresh fruit and seeds, can increase the satiety of the meal, stabilize glucose levels, and provide sustained energy for hours. The same goes for adding nuts to salads. In addition to providing crunch and flavor, they aid in the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins found in vegetables, such as vitamins A, D, E, and K. In hot dishes, nuts such as cashews and walnuts can be used in risottos, stir-fries, and even sauces, adding texture and depth to the dish. The secret is to use creativity to transform these small foods into active components of a complete meal. Another important point is the quality of the nuts you consume. Whenever possible, opt for raw or lightly toasted versions at home, without added salt, sugar, or preservatives. Nuts stored for long periods in hot, humid environments can oxidize or develop mycotoxins, such as aflatoxin in the case of peanuts. Therefore, buy small quantities. Store them in airtight containers in cool places, preferably in the refrigerator, especially in warmer climates. When toasting at home, use lower temperatures between 120 degrees and 150 degrees for a short time, and avoid using oils. This preserves the bioactive compounds and reduces the risk of lipid oxidation. A good practice is to alternate the types of nuts consumed throughout the week, ensuring a variety of nutrients and avoiding an overload of certain minerals, such as selenium in Brazil nuts. For those looking to control emotional appetite or reduce cravings for sweets, nuts can be a great ally, but you need a strategy. When eaten with dried fruits such as dates or apricots, they create a combination of natural sugar with fat and fiber, which calms the nervous system and reduces insulin spikes. This helps reduce the urge to consume processed sweets. Another tip is to prepare small pre-portioned snacks to carry in your purse, backpack, or leave in your desk drawer. This prevents impulsive decisions when hunger strikes and offers a practical and nutritious option to keep your energy stable throughout the day. The key is advanced preparation. Those who plan their snacks in advance tend to make better choices throughout the day. Nuts can also be incorporated into homemade recipes that replace ultra-processed foods. A classic example is the use of almonds to prepare homemade plant-based milk, free of preservatives and stabilizers. Just blend a cup of soaked almonds with 3 to 4 cups of water, strain, and store for up to 3 days. With this milk, you can make smoothies, plant-based lattes, porridge, and even light desserts. Another powerful recipe is cashew or almond butter, which can replace industrialized creams and toppings. In addition to being tasty, these butters are rich in healthy fats and work very well on toast, fruit, pancakes, or even as a base for savory sauces. Preparing these foods at home not only ensures control over the ingredients, but also reconnects people with the cooking process, something that is increasingly rare and necessary. It is important to remember that individualization is an essential factor in this process. Each body reacts differently to nuts, and factors such as digestibility, intolerances, nutritional goals, and health status must be considered. Some people, for example, may experience digestive discomfort with certain types of nuts nutrients, especially if they are consumed in excess or too raw. In these cases, soaking, that is, the process of letting the nuts soak for a few hours, can help neutralize anti-nutrients such as phytic acid and make nutrients more bioavailable. For those following specific diets such as low-carb, ketogenic, or vegan, nuts offer different advantages. While some prioritize fat content and satiety, others value the protein profile and essential minerals. The most important thing is to observe how your body responds and adjust your consumption accordingly. As this practical awareness develops, nuts cease to be a sporadic item or healthy supplement and take on a strategic role within a more coherent, functional, and wellness-oriented eating lifestyle. When used well, they represent one of the most accessible, versatile, and powerful ways to add nutritional quality to every meal. However, more than just an ingredient, they become a symbol of a larger change, a change in mindset. Swapping empty foods for nutrient-dense foods, choosing natural over artificial, listening to your body instead of just following your momentary cravings, all of this is revealed in small choices, such as a handful of well-selected nuts. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. How these kinds of choices, repeated often, begin to shape a lifestyle. Because good nutrition isn't just about healthy ingredients, but about consistently applying that knowledge day after day, even when you're busy, tempted, or short on time. It's time to understand how to turn this theory into routine, and the next step is to discover practical strategies for keeping this habit alive over time.